What's up, guys? It's Dan. So, I haven't done a lot of Darkest Dungeon content lately. As I told you, I was waiting on some patches that hadn't materialized, so I'm not going to wait on it any longer. So what I'm going to do today is talk about party composition. It's the most common question I get, and as Darkest Dungeon begins to expand to other consoles, and they're porting to iOS and hopefully Switch soon, and they're looking at there's a new DLC on Steam available. So as it begins to expand, I wanted to talk about the most common question I get. So they're kind of twofold. So the first one is I'm struggling with champion level dungeons, and I don't know what party to bring. They're kind of, I would say that's a tie for the most common question that I get. So that's what I want to talk about today. So I've talked to you a little bit about the champion level dungeons before, but I haven't really gone into some of the best ways that you can integrate your party composition and making you more successful going through some of the dungeons. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And first of all, I want to talk about champion level dungeons just as a kind of the disclaimer as we're talking about this. So if you are in the veteran, most of your characters are in the blue, they're veteran level, they're looking to move into champion type level, you're looking at going from yellow to red, so to speak. If that's you, go back and watch my video first before you go into looking at party integration, because this will make a lot more sense after you'd seen that, because there are some things you want to do before you go into party compositions and integrating certain parties into certain areas and those kinds of things. So we'll talk about briefly dungeons that you want to avoid when you're first going to champion level, and then we'll talk about what parties do better in some of the dungeons I'm going to recommend. So I'm going to recommend that you avoid the Warrens and you avoid the Weld completely until you're really comfortable and you have everybody established at level 6 and they are maxed out on skills and gear. So, and trinkets, really. You have the meta trinkets that you want to utilize. So we're going to ignore the Warrens and the Weld, not really talk about them. So this party composition that I'm going to give you is based around medium to long, and preferably what you're looking for are these ones here where it's explore 90% of the rooms, and I'll explain why. So that's an easy, fundamentally pretty simple type of dungeon to do. The RNG doesn't hurt you as bad in these because you basically got to explore the rooms. You can take a chance and do some of these other rooms where you just need to gather relics, and that could be really easy or it could be really difficult. By picking 90% of the rooms, in a long dungeon you probably don't have to explore between 2 and 3 rooms. In a medium dungeon you don't have to explore 2 rooms, and in a short dungeon 1 room typically. So as we look at that, that's ideally I would say that the focus you want to have as you're beginning to select your dungeons for what I'm going to talk about. But this party composition works with all of them. But we're going to talk primarily about Ruins and Cove, because these are the best 2 to farm, in my opinion, as you're trying to build up your gold and your skills. And that's because they are probably the most forgiving when it comes to the monsters that are inside of these rooms. So as we talk about this, keep that in mind. That's where I'm going from. So we're going to talk first about every party you want to bring a healer. So we're going to start with that right off the bat. Now I'm going to pick a Vestal here because it makes more sense. The Occultist is a lot more RNG based. Now it does limit you by bringing a Vestal that you're eliminating the Abomination, but we will talk about that as well with some of the exceptions you can make in the Cove. But you're going to bring a Vestal because they tend to be more consistent with the heals that they're putting off. That's the first thing. In the second slot, you're going to run here, and you can switch the Vestal to slot 3 or slot 4, but I typically run her in slot 3. In slot 3, you're going to run a utility character. So when I say utility, we're looking at Grave Robber, we're looking at Jester, and probably the Houndmaster would also perform well here. Some people run the Plague Doctor. My top 3 would probably be Grave Robber, Jester, Houndmaster. Not necessarily in that order, but Grave Robber is my number 1. I think currently she's probably the 2nd or 3rd best hero in the game. So you're going to bring a utility character. The reason you're going to bring utility is you want somebody who deals with traps, who has the ability to stun, or has the ability to have high crit so that they can offset stress, or they have the ability to stress heal like a Jester would. And you're not really going to bring a lot of buffs with him. Really what you're looking for are things that are going to be high crit, where you see her crit mod there is plus 10%, or plus 12%, excuse me. That's what you're looking at. And have the ability to stun if you wanted to, or to be able to hit the 4th row would be a really good bonus from the 3rd row, or the lunge here that has the high crit. I mean, she's really flexible, and she has great camping skills. So that's what you're looking for in the utility. Really a lot of flexibility, great camping skills, being able to disable traps and get your scout checks. Those are really important. Next you're looking at in the 2nd slot is really looking for pure damage. In my opinion, that's really the most important thing getting out of the 2nd slot, is somebody who's going to deal a ton of damage. Now with the advent of the shield breaker in the last DLC, I haven't tested a lot of it to be able to tell you guys where she belongs. So I'm just going to keep it simple, and we're going to throw a bounty hunter here. Typically a bounty hunter or a crusader, like if you were to run a crusader, I think it'd be better to run it here, which would allow you to get a leapfrog off, and then you could move your grave robber to slot 2, and that would just leave your 1st slot. Now the 1st slot, I mean the meta truthfully is the Hellion, and I'll show you why. By bringing the Hellion, you have the ability to hit the back row from row 1, which makes her really, really good. It makes her super strong. Now some people say, well, I'm going to bring a tank character, I'm going to bring that. You really don't have to bring a tank character. You just want somebody from the 1st slot to be able to hit the 4th slot, which, now that there's a shield breaker, if you notice, she can hit the 4th row, she can hit all 4 rows. She has a lot of different abilities here, but we're not going to talk about her in this video, but she has the ability to hit the 4th row as well from the front row. So maybe you want to put her there, but my personal preference as far as party composition is it's going to look something like this. Damage in the first 2 rows, utility in the 3rd row, and in the 4th row you're looking at a healer. Now it doesn't have to flow that way. This would be a pretty solid party for the ruins, especially with the Crusaders' additional damage to the undead. Now if we were to make a party for the Cove and you didn't have a Hellion, it would look something like this. Let's see, for utility we could bring her, or we could even bring a Jester. But really what we're looking for is we want to bring 2 Abominations and bringing an Occultist who would be able to heal if it came to that. But the Abominations can heal themselves. By bringing 2 Abominations, it allows you to actually eliminate this and just go for straight direct damage if you wanted to. But primarily you'd bring another utility, which could be the Jester here. You could bring 2 Abominations, which is one of my favorites. The 2nd row is going to be doing damage to rows 2 and 3. And even though the front row can't damage row 4 of the enemy party, you're allowed to you can put off enough damage that you can truly power through rows 1 through 3 and just leave the 4th row for dead. But what does become important is if your first 2 characters here, if you're, let's say you're running 2 Abominations, you really want to look at somebody that can hit that back row. Whoops, where is, there's one. That's a good example in the Cove. You could run 2 Abominations, a Plague Doctor, then you could run an Occultist. You could run two Abominations and 2 Plague Doctors, but you really want to have that ability to hit the 4th row because you don't have it with the 2 A-bombs. The reason they perform so well and farm so well in the Cove is simply based off of they have a lot of Blight. Blight performs really well there. It performs good in the Ruins too, but not as well as it does in the Cove when you're running into a lot more prot mobs. The damage in the places that these guys are able to hit and they're able to stun, where there isn't a lot of stun resistance in that area. So if just to review, as you're going through and picking your party composition, you want to look at people who are going to do damage in the first 2 rows. 3rd row should really be utility. Now you can always interchange these for what specific row you're going to put them in, but basically you're looking at 2 damage classes, 1 utility class, 1 healer, and then as you go through the fight and you're progressing through the fight, we're going to talk about kind of quickly how you want to do it. You want to be very selective with your stuns. If you have the ability to eliminate an enemy turn, so killing off a mob, for example, versus stunning. You should only stun if you know that character is going to come and hit you like a ton of bricks. Example would be a tree branch shakedown. Some of the specific enemies that you guys know that are going to hit you really hard, but tree branch shakedown is just one example where you know somebody can crit you and it's going to move you immediately to death's door. That's when you may want to stun there. But stun more from a secondary option rather than a primary option. If you were to stun on the first turn, I see a lot of people do that. That's completely fine. It allows you to get a jump start and then eliminate an enemy turn and get caught up on the second of your attacks, which is fine. No pulling. So a lot of people get into the mindset that they're not going to bring somebody who can hit every row. Instead, what they're going to do is bring somebody who can pull, like with this Demon's Pool here. It clears corpses, it pulls mobs. No, that's a waste of a turn. You don't do enough damage to offset that ability, so don't do that. Don't pull. That should be extremely situational and rare that you ever need to pull. Don't do it. Only heal your team when you're at 45% or lower. So don't be the person that's sitting there spamming heals. You should be able to use abilities like the Occultist Spaghetti by running the Occultist in slot 3 here instead of slot 4. You get Sacrificial Stab, which gives you an ability to stab rows 1 through 3 so he can be offensive. You need to be aggressive. You really need to be aggressive. You can't, if somebody's at 60%, you can't just sit back and heal. Really, you want to focus when you're at 45%, maybe 50 to 55%, or you're healing up prior to going into a boss fight. Don't spend most of your battles sending your healers only to heal. If you're running a Vestal, you're going to run Judgement primarily to be able to be a little more offensive. Now this accuracy isn't great, so you may need to offset that from time to time with a Trinket if you really want to be aggressive. But if you're going to spam heals, primarily you want to use this one that's healing everyone versus dumping major heal after major heal into someone. The next thing, your crits are designed to help heal stress, and they are also there for the combination or the added effect of that they're going to eliminate an enemy turn quicker. So it's more important to crit than it is to stress heal, because if you crit, you're likely to get a little stress heal off of it. So for example, if you were to run a Jester, I don't even bring Inspiring Tune. I'm looking at bringing things like, if you run Finale here, you're getting a crit mod. If you're running Dirk Stab, you're able to move throughout the party to make it easier. But primarily, if you're looking at crit stress heals, the Grave Robber really outperforms pretty much everyone with Lunge and with her Thrown Dagger. That makes her extremely useful. That's why I have her rated so high. The next thing you're looking at is the attack order and who you want to eliminate. Typically, you want to eliminate the 4th row first, and that's because you have the least amount of heroes that are able to damage that row. So you got to damage it quickly and get it out of the way. From there, you're typically doing 3rd row or whoever you can eliminate a turn on. So for example, if you were to eliminate, let's say you kill the back row, and you have rows 1 through 3, but one of your heroes last turn was only able to hit the 2nd row, typically it's more beneficial to kill off that guy in the 2nd row than it is to hit the 3rd row, even if he's going to give you stress damage. So you're typically going 4th row, 3rd row, and or turn elimination, row 2, row 1, and you're always going to leave prop mobs last, in my opinion, unless they're dealing an absolute fuck ton of damage to you. Typically, protected mobs are the ones you want to deal with last, because they don't also deal a lot of damage, typically, generally speaking, and they're not, you can damage them over time. By dotting prot mobs and allowing them to essentially rot with your dot, you're able to get the full damage out of your dot versus doing a dot on the 2nd or on the characters in the 3rd and 4th row that are going to be dead next turn anyway. If there is a healer, they're typically prioritized. And also, we've always talked about this, stress mobs are way more important to eliminate than going through damage mobs. And the reason for that is healing damage is easy. You heal it when you eat, you heal it when you camp, you heal it at the end of the dungeon completely for free. So your campfires should always focus on stress heal rather than damage heal. if you are stressed. So I know that was a lot. I tried to go pretty quickly so the video didn't last 30 and 40 minutes because I could have talked about this for an hour. But just to recap, what you're looking at, first 2 rows here, primarily damage characters. Last 2 rows here, primarily utility and healers, whatever order you want to do it in. As you get into your fights, be selective with your stuns. Don't pull, that's a waste of a turn. Only heal when characters are about 40 to 50% or lower. Utilize your judgments, your spaghettis, utilize any offensive attacks they have, and even in worst case scenario, if you don't need to heal, use a debuff on somebody. Your crits, like especially from the Grave Robber, allow you to heal stress with a combination of turn elimination. And your attack order is primarily focusing on healers, rolls 3 and 4, or being able to eliminate enemy turns, and then prioritizing enemy turns, eliminating enemy turns as you move forward. So thanks for watching, guys. I know it was a lot, and I tried to go really quickly. So please rewatch it if you need to. And my next video is going to be on my first impressions of the Shield Breaker. I'll be coming out with that over the next probably few days. That one will be out. So thanks for watching. See you later.